Arutz Sheva, Israel National TV, and Or Olam, the Center for Biblical Zionism, present Ari Abramowitz and Jeremy Gimpel.
The world only hears an Israeli voice. We want the world to hear a Jewish voice. We're all part of the same body, and that body is Israel.
I chose Israel in spite, because this is where God hangs out.
Hashem is with us. He's protecting us. He's brought us to the land of Israel, and we are here to stay. Tuesday nights in Jerusalem are never going to be the same again.
Live from the heart of Israel, welcome to Tuesday Night Live in Jerusalem.
שם נשיר שיר חדש ובנענה עלם 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 שם נשיר שיר חדש ובנענה
Every week, we gather to bring one of the beautiful lights of Israel and share it with the world. And this week, we have the honor of having one of the greatest rabbis, in my opinion, in the entire world, the chief rabbi of Efrat, Rabbi Shlomo Riskin. Now, usually on our radio shows, Ari is the one that introduced the guests. And I asked special permission tonight if I would be allowed to introduce Rabbi Shlomo Riskin. You know, some people say the rabbi's too right. Some people say he's too left. Let me tell you the way that I see Rabbi Riskin. Ezra and Nehemiah, Ezra and Nehemiah ended the Babylonian exile by bringing the Jews out of Bavel, bringing them back to Israel, and bringing the Torah back to the people of Israel. Rabbi Riskin, at the height of his career, in one of the most prominent synagogues in Manhattan, in Lincoln Square, left all of it, the fame, the fortune, the prestige. He picked up and brought the leaders of his community not only to Israel, but to the barren hills of Efrat. And today, Efrat is the largest settlement in Gush Etzion. His organization, Or Torah Stone, has over 18 institutions that are all dedicated to bringing the Torah back to the Jewish people in the land of Israel. There's no question that if there was a Bible written today, that he would absolutely feature in it, because he is of biblical proportions. What he's done, the example that he sets for all Jewish leaders in the exile, they all have to look at him and say, well, you know, he did it. What am I doing here? So tonight, we would like to introduce my rabbi since I can remember, Rabbi Shlomo Riskin. Rabbi, thank you so much for coming.
It's wonderful to be here.
The reason we invited you in specific for our first show is because you are an example to all Jewish leaders in our times. Could you share with us the journey you have taken, not necessarily the physical journey, the physical events, but the spiritual journey you've been on?
Questions?
I'd like to say a few things before I say that. That's how Jewish speakers used to speak throughout the generations. You know why I'm so thrilled to be here, and I never finish being thrilled? I'm here for 25 glorious years. The best decision I ever made after the decision to marry my wife was the decision to come to Israel. And I want to tell you something. You know why I'm still so glad to be here? Because today, I had to get my New York office. And I'm calling and calling and calling and calling. And why isn't anybody answering me? And then somebody told me, you know what today's date is? And I was thrilled that I didn't know. And last week, when it was December 25th, I didn't know it either. But I darn sure knew when Rosh Hashanah was. And when Pesach and Sukkot were. You know why else I'm so glad to be here? Little kids speak Hebrew. Aren't they geniuses? And without an accent. And you know why else? I get up in the morning, 5 o'clock a.m. news. It starts with Shema Yisrael. And television closes with the verse of the day. That's what it means to live in your homeland. And there's nothing like it. But now I want to really answer the question in a little bit greater depth. Because it's a very important question. I came here first in 1960-61. And I was very excited because it was very clear to me that the confirmation of God's covenant to the Jewish people, God's promise that even if you're scattered to the ends of the heavens, God will lift us up and restore us to the land of our fathers. Devarim Lamed, Deuteronomy chapter 30, was taking place in Israel. And I met my wife here, and we fell in love, and we promised each other that we would live here. Because there's nowhere else for a Jew to live. And then I want to tell you the truth. I couldn't get a job here. I had a very good job in America. I think I could probably have gotten any job I wanted in America. I was a professor at Talmud at Yeshiva University. I was the rabbi of the Lincoln Square Synagogue. Nobody would hire me in Israel, not even as a high school teacher. And I'm not a bad teacher, I promise you. It took me a long time to find out why. I'll tell you what the secret was, because you need to know the culture of every country. Someone who once praised me very highly, and I said to him, you know, you're a liar. And he said, what do you mean? I said, because I applied to be a teacher for your high school, and you wouldn't even let me give a class to test me. And he turned red. He said, I hope that you had forgotten. He said, but you know, you looked like you were 16 years old. I was then maybe 27 or 28. You looked like you were 16 years old, and you didn't have a beard. And in this country, it doesn't work like that. And I thought to myself, so why didn't you tell me to grow a beard? And I would have done it in a minute. It's not hard to do, I promise. Now I wouldn't grow a beard if my life depended on it. But let me finish the story. I met a guy, a wonderful guy, a real biblical personality, Moshe Moshkevitz. And many of you may not have heard of him. He's in his 80s. But when I met him, and I was in my late 30s, he had excellent connections. He was the chief counsel to the Minister of the Interior. And I was here as a scholar in residence in Kibbutz Ein Tzurim. And I was giving a shiur, and he came to the class. And at the end of the class, he said, what are you doing in America? We need you in Israel. And I said, and I need Israel, but I can't get a job in Israel. So he said, do you have a few minutes? I said, yes, I have a few hours. He took me to the empty hill, which is now Efrat. And he said to me, you know, they once asked Dizengoff, the first mayor of Tel Aviv, how do you become a mayor of a city in Israel? And Mayor Dizengoff said, you want to be a mayor of a city in Israel? Very simple. Build the city. So Moshe Moshkevitz said to me, Golda Meir in 1967 wrote in the law books, there will be a city of Efrat on these hills. However, it has to be populated initially by people from high economic, educationally oriented countries. She specified, like the United States and South Africa, because she wanted a few doctors, a few lawyers, you know how it is. Jewish professions. And Moshe Moshkevitz said, let's be partners. I'll worry about the Israeli politics. You get the Americans and the South Africans because I can't speak Hebrew. We shook hands. I davened mincha on the spot. And it worked. And you know why it worked? Because the real reason I'm here is that this is a miracle country. And this is the land where not to believe in miracles is not to be a realist.
Rabbi, we have a question for you here in the crowd.
Pardon?
We have a question for you here in the crowd. You know, you give a rabbi a pulpit, you'd be here all night. All right, here we go. This is the question.
Rob Riskin, I would like to know, what would you advise to the American rabbis today? Would you encourage them to dismantle their communities and have them encourage their kehilot to make aliyah as you did? Or would you encourage them to strengthen their communities?
What would I advise to American rabbis today? Would I encourage them to teach people about Shabbos? Or would I encourage them to teach people about Sunday and go to church? It's the same exact question. Because the same Torah that commands the Sabbath commands us to live in Israel. Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, Bamidbar, chapter 33, pasuk 53. For horashtem et haaretz v'yishavtem ba. You shall conquer the land and dwell in it. The Bible tells us we're supposed to live in Israel. Birkat HaMazon tells us we're supposed to live in Israel. The Amidah tells us we're supposed to live in Israel. We aren't paying attention to the Amidah. We aren't paying attention to Birkat HaMazon. You know, it's a pity that living in Israel isn't a chumrah like a black hat, then everybody in Borough Park would be rushing to live in Israel. It's only a mitzvah.
Rabbi, before we say goodbye tonight, if you could leave with one message for all the people in the crowd and for all the people watching all over the world, what would that message be?
Can I tell a short story? What made me stay in Israel? And this is the real spiritual journey. It was very exciting to leave America. They made parties for me. They gave me a Sefer Torah. Maybe they were glad to see me leave. When I got here, the romanticism died pretty quickly. The streets weren't paved, and there was no electricity that first difficult winter, and no heat, and no bakery, and no food store. And then I would get up in the middle of the night, because I didn't have a job, and think that maybe I made a mistake. While I was having all these second thoughts and trying to figure out if I had a way back, there was a knock on my door, and Yoni Ben Ari, who still lives in Israel, and he was in charge of security, came into the room, and he came in with an Uzi, and he said to me, Kvod Harav, you have guard duty tonight from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. My wife looked at our 4 children and said in a loud whisper, if Abba is guarding us, maybe we better spend the night in Jerusalem. Yoni Ben Ari saw me looking at the Uzi a little crookedly, and he said, Kvod Harav, you mean you don't know how to shoot an Uzi? I said, shoot an Uzi? I've never killed a mosquito in my life. Well, Yoni Ben Ari took me outside. There's a little forest in Efrat, which I affectionately call Central Park West Bank. And he took me out to that forest. It's much easier to learn how to shoot an Uzi than it is to learn a difficult Tosfot. So I managed very quickly. And I had guard duty from 2 to 6 a.m. I had guard duty with a guy named Yossi from one of the Scandinavian countries who's still living in Israel, in Efrat. 4 children. Anyway, Baruch Hashem, I married 2 of them. At that time, we were both much younger. The silence of the night. He asks me, tell me, Kvod Harav, what did you do before you made Aliyah? And I described, without a little nostalgic longing, life as the rabbi of Lincoln Square Synagogue. And then I asked him, what did you do before you made Aliyah? And he said, I was a Christian. And I went to church every Sunday with my mother and father and brother. But I always felt some kind of tie to Israel and the Jewish people that I couldn't put my finger on. When I was graduated from high school, everybody had to write a paper. I wrote the paper on the burgeoning state of Israel. Then came the 73 war. I didn't feel like going to university. I didn't know what I wanted to major in. And there was a cry for volunteers. And 3 Christian friends and I volunteered to go to Israel to work on the fields. And then I fell in love with the land. And I started reading and fell in love with the history and the theology. I wanted to keep kosher, so I became a vegetarian. It was a non-religious kibbutz I was living in. So then I wanted to keep Shabbat. So they told me, you can't keep Shabbat on this non-religious kibbutz, but what you can do is go to a special school for converts in Kfar Tzion, right near Efrat. But there was no Efrat then. And I went. And after 6 months, I was a very good student. I got a date to go to the mikveh to convert. And then I figured, hey, I'm only 19 years old. I better speak to my parents. I got in touch with them. I said I had to make a very difficult decision. They immediately sent me tickets. I went home. And after a vegetarian dinner, I announced that I wanted to link my destiny with Israel and become a Jew. My mother turned into a cold sweat and fainted dead away. When she was revived, she looked at me hard and she said to me, "You don't have to convert. You don't have to convert because I'm Jewish, and in Judaism, the religion follows the mother." When the Nazi Obersturmbannführer walked into my house, and there was a Kinderaktion, and he was collecting all the children. And my father, who was the chazan, the cantor of the shtetl, cried out, "Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad," and the Nazi shot him dead. And the Nazi picked me up and threw me into a cattle car for Theresienstadt. And I felt in that cattle car that if one Holocaust took place, another was even more likely, and I didn't want my children or grandchildren to suffer like I suffered, so I took an oath that if I ever got out of the hellhole alive, it would be as a Christian. I got out, I don't know how, when, why. I had no one to answer to because all of my blood relatives were murdered. So I lived as a Christian, and until this moment, the only other person in the world who knows of my Jewish heritage is your father. But if you want to rejoin the religion of my parents and grandparents, may the God in whom I can no longer believe bless you and keep you.
Rabbi.
I just want you to know that when I heard that, I knew that there was no turning back, that I had come back, that God's promise, even if you're scattered to the ends of the heavens, I will bring you back, is taking place here. And this is the country to which every Jew in the world must and will return.
Rabbi, thank you for a lifetime of devotion to the Jewish people. It has been an honor to have you on.
Every night we want to end with a little Torah. But before we do that, I have to take a second and thank Hashem for this amazing evening. I'm not going to lie, I haven't been sleeping much lately. And when I do sleep, I usually wake up in cold sweat screaming after some Tuesday Night Live scenario gone wrong. And I'm just so grateful to our Creator that He let everything go so smoothly and so wonderfully for our first show. So tonight we're going to talk about the Torah portion of the week. Everyone knows that last week the Jewish people entered into a new book of the Torah, the book of Exodus, of course named after the mass departure of the Jewish people from the land of Israel. We also know that every book in the Torah, every name of every book, has a certain essence to it. It actually defines the book in and of itself. But in Hebrew, the book isn't called Exodus, the book is called Shemot. So the question obviously is, Shemot means names. So what do names have to do with the redemption of the Jewish people from Egypt? What do names have to do with anything of this book? I mean, every other book, it makes sense. Bereshit is Genesis. Genesis is the beginning. It's the beginning of humanity, the beginning of creation. It's the beginning of the Jewish people. Vayikra is to call. Leviticus is all about the connection the Jewish people have to God in the times of the temple. Bamidbar, in the desert, or Numbers in English, is all about our lives in the desert, in our transition going into the land of Israel. So what is Shemot? What do names have to do with the redemption? So let's take a closer look at the Torah portion of last week. And if you look at the second chapter of the book of Exodus, you'll see an amazing pattern. The Torah goes so out of its way to not mention anyone's name. When you look, it says at the very first passage of chapter 2, a man went from the house of Levi, and he took a daughter of Levi. The Midrash, the oral Torah, an integral part of Jewish tradition that was passed from God to Moses at Sinai, explains that that man from the house of Levi was Amram. He wasn't just another person. He was the leader of the Jewish people at that time. In fact, the Midrash says that when Paro sent out his decree that all of the children need to be cast into the Nile, he divorced his wife. And all of the Jewish people at that time followed in his example and divorced their wives as well. Only afterwards, when Miriam said, Abba, your decree is worse than his decree. How can you do that? Did he then remarry his wife? And then all of the Jewish people after him remarried their wives. Such a powerful leader. And he's mentioned here as just a man from the house of Levi. A daughter of Levi, that's Yocheved. That's the most influential woman of that generation. She was the only survivor, according to Rashi, of the original Hebrews. Now, if you keep on reading, it says, the woman conceived and gave birth to a son. Well, that son is Moshe Rabbeinu. In the book of Genesis, the whole book is this begot that, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the 12 sons. It's all about the names, and all of a sudden, the savior of the Jewish people is just some son. That's the first time the Torah ever mentions a leader of the Jewish people, not by name. Then the Torah goes on to talk about Moshe's concealment for 3 months, and then how he's set on the Nile. And then it says, his sister stationed herself at a distance to know what would be done with him. His sister, Miriam, the prophetess. And we still have no idea who these people are according to the Pshat, just according to the scripture. Paro's daughter went down to bathe by the river, and her maidens walked along the river. His sister said to Paro's daughter, shall I summon for you a wet nurse? The daughter of Paro said, go. The girl went and summoned the boy's mother. I mean, it's almost comical how far the Torah goes out of its way to not mention anyone's name. So we have a book called the Book of Names, and the Torah specifically mentions no one's names. Let's take a deeper look. If you open up to Vayikra Rabbah 32, it says the people of Israel were redeemed because they kept their names. Okay, so now we have a book of names that goes out of its way to mention no one's name, and it's because of those names that the Torah doesn't mention that the Jewish people were redeemed. So what on earth is going on here? What is the book of Shemot all about? So let's start from the beginning. The book of Bereshit was the birthing of the nation of Israel. It was the birthing of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. See, the name Exodus is incomplete. It's not just about the departure of the Jewish people from Egypt. It was about a family becoming a nation. It was their names that kept them separate in Egypt. That's why it was so important. It's not about the individual lives anymore. It's about the entire nation. It's about the entrance into a new phase of Jewish history where God no longer communicates only to individuals, but he communicates to us now as a nation. The Torah in the book of Shemot is taking us to our final destination. It's taking us to where God had planned from the very beginning. He promised Abraham that he would make us as many as stars in the sky, and that he would watch over us and connect with us and guide us as his people. And in Shemot is when that happens. In fact, if you look in the Torah and you see what is the archetype of the relationship between God and the nation of Israel? Well, when we're good, we get a lot of rain. But when we're bad, we don't get any rain. But what does that really come to teach us? I mean, we say it twice a day in Kriyat Shema, V'haya im Shema tishmeu. If you listen and hearken to the commandments of God, then there will be rain. And if you don't, there won't be rain. We say it twice a day for a reason. What is the Torah really revealing to us about this relationship? What the Torah is saying is it doesn't matter if you're one righteous Jew in this audience. If the Jewish people aren't deserving, we're all going to suffer. If the entire Jewish nation is not aligned with God's will, there will be no rain. The concept of Kol Israel Arevim Zelazeh was born in the book of Shemot, that all of the nation of Israel are intrinsically intertwined with each other. God communicates with us as a nation. It started in Shemot. In Egypt, we were all together. When the Jewish people were exiled from the land of Israel 2,000 years ago, we all suffered together. This was true in Purim, it was true with Hitler, and it's true today with Ahmadinejad. The same pattern. God communicates to us as a Jewish people, and it doesn't matter if you're one good guy. We are all in the same boat together. What the book of Shemot comes to teach us is that we started as a family, and we became a nation. Today, the Jewish people are a beautiful nation, and now it's time we become a family again. God gave us the Torah to create a perfected society. And the only way our society can be perfected, to be a light to all societies of the world, is if we really see each other as family. That when there's a widow or an orphan or a poor person, that is a part of you. That's your family member. Only then can we really create a perfect society. Now, last week's Parsha, Shemot, ended in a lot of despair. I mean, just as the Jewish people thought they were going to be redeemed, Paro made their lives that much more miserable. And today we're faced with that same exact challenge. In 1948, we saw a glimmer of hope. We said, this is it, 2,000 years. The state of Israel is born. In 1967, we're like, my goodness, we can go up to the Temple Mount now? We can go to the Kotel whenever we want and daven? This is it. We've made it. And just like the blueprint that Shemot has set for us, we're starting to reach that point of despair again. And we're starting to say, well, there's the PLO, and there's the Hamas, and there is that maniac in Iran. What are we going to do with that guy? He's building a nuclear bomb, isn't he? And a lot of people are losing hope. A lot of people are scared. And a lot of that fear is what's stopping people from moving to Israel and making their lives here. I'll tell you guys a quick story. This last Saturday night, I went to my rabbi's house, Rabbi Chaim Richman. And I said, Rabbi, I'm not leaving here until you teach me Torah about the Parsha. And he said, Jeremy, I don't have time right now. And I'm like, Rabbi, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving until you teach me just one Torah, whatever it is, whatever comes out, I just want to hear it. And he said, all right, I'll teach you a small Torah. And the Torah blew my mind so much that I changed my entire speech tonight just to give it over to you guys. He says that Rabbi Nachman says that every person is born with a certain quota of fear that will be expressed in this world, a certain amount of fear that will have to be lived out in this world. And you can choose to be fearful about your past, fearful about your future, fearful about your economic situation, fearful about your children. No matter what, though, you are going to experience fear in this world. But Rabbi Nachman then teaches the most amazing Torah. He says that you can take that fear and elevate it to its source. And as you start living fearfully, you start living with a lot of courage. You start living happily because you know there's nothing to fear other than God. Tonight, everyone here in Tuesday Night Live is a part of something amazing. We've all chosen the land of Israel over fear. We've all chosen to make our lives here in the land of Israel. The Jews of Jerusalem are back after 2,000 years, and we're never going to leave. Tuesday nights in Jerusalem are never going to be the same again, because finally, Jerusalem is what it was always meant to be, a light to the entire world,